The darkness around me seemed to press in even harder. The moment the lights flickered back on, I found myself still sitting in the booth, frozen. My mind was racing. What had I just seen on the monitor? It wasn't a human figure. The shape, long, distorted, didn't belong in this world. It was like something from a nightmare, something unnatural. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a terrible mistake by not listening to the rules. I had been told over and over again not to break the rules, and there I was, staring into the void, doing exactly that. I had already made eye contact with prisoners. I had broken the cardinal rule by looking at cell 13. I had allowed myself to get too close to the mystery, too curious, and now I was paying the price. I tried to steady my breath, pushing away the rising tide of panic. I told myself that I had to stay calm. I was a professional, a night guard at a secure facility, but the walls of the booth suddenly felt much smaller, like they were closing in on me. I checked the monitors again, hoping for some sign that everything was normal, but I already knew deep down that normalcy was something I couldn't find here. The prison had its own rhythm, its own rules, and I was an intruder. When I flicked through the various feeds, I saw that everything was eerily quiet again. The prisoners were still locked in their cells, and the hallways were empty. But the silence was suffocating. The absence of sound felt wrong, like it was too quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists in places where life has been drained out, leaving nothing but the echo of what used to be. But then, I noticed something in the corner of one of the feeds, something that hadn't been there before. A faint shadow, just a flicker at first. It moved again, but not like a person. It was wrong. It wasn't the usual low hum of a prisoner walking past their cell. This was different. I quickly zoomed in on the camera feed. It was coming from the hallway near cell 13. The shadow moved again, slower this time. It seemed to stretch, as though it was following the path of the lights. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. That was no regular shadow. It had form. It was alive. And then, something unexplainable happened. The monitor in front of me fuzzed, as though the signal was breaking up. The screen began to warp, distorting the image of the hallway. I leaned in closer, heart pounding, hoping to see clearer, hoping that it was just a malfunction. But the shadow, it was still there. It grew larger, stretching unnaturally along the walls, making its way toward the security booth. I grabbed the intercom, ready to call for help, but my voice caught in my throat. The words wouldn't come. I couldn't shake the sense that whatever was in the hallway was already aware of me, that it was watching me through the screen. Watching me as I watched it. Focus, I muttered to myself. I had to do something. I wasn't alone here. I wasn't supposed to be afraid. I was supposed to keep the inmates in line, keep control of the situation. But as I sat there, frozen, I realized that the situation had already gotten out of my hands. I reached for the security switch that would allow me to contact the other guards, but the moment my fingers brushed it, the lights went out again. This time, it wasn't just the flicker of the bulbs. The entire prison went dark. A deep, suffocating darkness that seemed to swallow everything around me. For a second, I felt nothing but pure terror, the kind of terror that you can't reason with. My pulse raced in my ears, my breathing shallow. I didn't know if it was my mind playing tricks or if the darkness was real, but I could feel something moving closer to me. Something unhuman, something that was hunting. I stumbled out of the booth, trying to find my bearings in the blackness. My flashlight beam barely cut through the dark, but it felt so useless. I could hear nothing but my own panicked breaths and the distant rumble of the prison, like a beast that was waking up after years of slumber. I quickly turned the flashlight down the corridor, and that's when I saw it, a figure, standing still in the shadows, just like the one I'd seen on the monitor. It wasn't a prisoner, and it wasn't a guard. The figure was tall, far too tall for a person, and its limbs were stretched unnaturally long. Its face, if you could call it a face, was dark, like the void itself, a hollow silhouette that seemed to absorb the light. There were no eyes, no features, just darkness that seemed to stare straight through me. Before I could move, the thing stepped forward, and I was hit with a gust of cold air, freezing me in place. A voice, deep and unnatural, filled the air. "You shouldn't have looked. Now it's too late." I couldn't move, couldn't scream. I just stood there, paralyzed, staring at the figure that seemed to stretch beyond what was humanly possible. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, but the figure was gone. The hallway was empty. I could hear the faint echo of my own breath, but nothing else. I felt as though I had been in a dream, a nightmare I couldn't escape. I stumbled back toward the security booth, my heart pounding in my chest. The screen was still on, still showing the quiet, sterile prison hallways, but now the shadows seemed to move differently. They were darker, longer, twisting in ways that shouldn't be possible. I had broken the rules. I had looked, and now something had noticed me, something that wasn't supposed to exist. I stumbled back into the booth and locked the door behind me, my hands shaking as I tried to calm my breathing. But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it, watching me, waiting for the next mistake. The next few hours felt like an eternity. I sat in the booth, gripping the armrests of my chair as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. My mind raced, and every corner of the prison seemed to pulse with an unseen presence. What was that thing in the hallway? Was it real? Or was I losing my grip on reality? I kept staring at the monitors, watching the same empty corridors I had seen countless times before. But now, nothing looked normal. Every shadow seemed darker. Every flicker of light felt more unsettling. My heart wouldn't slow down. No matter how much I tried to convince myself that it was all just a product of my own fear, I knew something had changed. Something had shifted, and I wasn't sure I was going to survive the night. The eerie stillness of the prison was almost deafening. I'd heard the noises before, distant murmurs, the occasional scraping of metal, but tonight, everything was different. The air felt thick, suffocating. I could almost hear the walls closing in. I stood up and paced the booth, trying to shake the overwhelming sense of dread that clung to me. I could still hear the voice in my mind, echoing the warning, "Now it's too late." What did that mean? Why had I been chosen? Why had it come after me? I turned my attention back to the monitor, hoping that somehow something would make sense of this madness. But as I flicked through the camera feeds, I noticed that the prison had started to look different. The cells were darker than they should have been. The shadows stretched unnaturally long across the floor. And something else, something I couldn't explain, was moving within those shadows. I looked at the feed from the West Wing, the one where Jacobs had been earlier. The screen was fuzzy at first, but then it cleared. I saw the flicker of movement just at the edge of the frame. My breath caught in my throat as I zoomed in on the image. There, at the far end of the hall, was another figure. It wasn't an inmate. It was something else. It was tall, too tall, and its form was hunched, like it was trying to shrink itself to fit in the narrow hallway. Its arms hung unnaturally long, dragging across the floor as it moved forward. I felt the cold grip of terror wrap around my chest as I realized that this wasn't just some hallucination. It was real. I tried to steady my hands, but I could barely hold on to the controls as I zoomed the camera in closer. The figure's head was tilted at an odd angle, as though it was looking directly at me, even though it couldn't possibly know I was watching. Its face, if it could be called a face, was a void, a swirling blackness that seemed to shift and change. I could hear the faint sound of breathing, slow and labored, coming from the speaker on the intercom. I pulled away from the monitor, gasping for air. My heart was pounding so loudly in my ears I thought it would burst. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the guards. I was alone in the booth. The rules had already been broken. And now, whatever that thing was, it was coming for me. The sound of scraping metal echoed in the hallway again, followed by a low, guttural growl. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My mind was frozen in place, paralyzed by fear. The prison wasn't just a place of confinement anymore. It had become something else. It was alive in ways I couldn't explain. And the things inside it were not human. They were something else, something ancient, something that had been trapped here for too long. And now, it was getting out. I stood up and paced the booth again, trying to think. I had to get out of here. I had to leave before whatever it was that had been watching me found me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't just the prison that was watching me. It was the thing that had been trapped here, waiting. I turned back to the monitor, my breath shaky. The figure was still there, moving closer. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was real. Its body seemed to stretch and twist as it moved, its limbs growing longer, more distorted, the way a puppet's limbs might bend in unnatural ways. I quickly scanned the other cameras, trying to find something that would make sense of this madness. But I couldn't. Every feed looked the same. Empty cells, dark hallways, and shadowy figures that seemed to move in and out of the light. I couldn't escape it. The prison was alive, and it was coming from me. In a sudden moment of clarity, I remembered the warnings from the other guards, especially Rick's warning about Cell 13. I had broken the rules, but it wasn't just about the rules anymore. It was about survival. I had to stop whatever was happening here before it consumed me like it had consumed the others. I grabbed the intercom, my hand shaking. I was about to send out a distress call when the voice stopped me. It wasn't the voice of a prisoner or a guard. It was the same low, guttural voice I'd heard earlier. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. It whispered, "You can't escape. You've seen too much. Now you belong to us." The words echoed in my mind, and the air around me seemed to grow colder, denser. I could feel the presence moving closer, its weight pressing against me, suffocating me. I grabbed the flashlight and moved toward the exit, trying to shake off the terror that gripped me. But the hallways were too long, too dark. I wasn't going to make it. I could already feel the walls closing in. I had made a mistake by looking. I had broken the rule. And now, the price was my soul.